And I like starting with this idea of connection because whether it's everyday life or your career, we meet somebody, and sometimes we have great rapport right away, right? And that's really fun. You see, you hit it off. But sometimes you meet somebody and you're not really hitting it off. Sometimes you can sense that they're not really into you. Maybe you don't like them, whatever the case may be. But you still want to influence that person, especially if it's somebody you're trying to sell to. And I go immediately, when I encounter this kind of situation, to a quote that's attributed to Abraham Lincoln. "I don't like that person," he supposedly said. "I must get to know him better." So you take it as a challenge to find a way to connect with that person and influence them. And this is where we can really start to learn from spies as well. Because let's step back and think about it. Spies aren't necessarily trying to recruit people they would choose to spend time with. They're often tasked with recruiting criminals, terrorists, diplomats from some of the world's most odious regimes. They have to connect with those people and find that real bond on some level and in some regard. And they do so with several methods, and one is known as tactical empathy, sometimes referred to as radical empathy. CIA case officers are trained to find that kernel of humanity in somebody and focus on that and not the many terrible things they might be involved in. So it's the criminal who's actually a devoted family man, or the terrorist that practices acts of charitable good. Now, as a salesperson, you're not going to have to deal with people that have those kinds of flaws, obviously. But I think the analogies are clear when you're dealing with somebody who you don't have great rapport with, you haven't hit it off with. How do you connect with those people? The other things that spies are trained in, and they screen for this when they're recruiting case officers, is a sense of intellectual curiosity. We all have things that we're passionate about and interested in, and I talk a lot with sales teams about how to lean into those passions, how to grow them, how to connect. But being curious about others is a great way to overcome that aversion sometimes when you're trying to get to know somebody. So one case officer, for instance, told me for my book that when he was training, he was paired up with somebody from a very different background to do some training exercise. He came from a northeastern, upper middle class background, elite prep school, Ivy League college, and he was paired with somebody from a very rural background who was really passionate about hunting, and he didn't know anything about hunting. Now, he didn't fake it and act like he knew everything about hunting. All he had to do was be sincerely curious and interested and demonstrate that respect of the intellectual curiosity for somebody. So this idea of radical empathy, this idea of intellectual curiosity is a good pathway forward for you to think about that Abraham Lincoln quote and try to connect more deeply with people where you don't naturally hit it off. Now, the final point on here I want to share, which I think is an even more powerful way to overcome these challenges. I have a personal story about it, and I think it'll resonate here. But the idea is that vulnerability breeds intimacy, and humanity breeds credibility.